And YouTube is starting. And I see that we are now live streaming, Jeff, so I will turn it over to you.
All right. Morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good this morning. Thanks for being flexible and being able to get on the Zoom. Hopefully we'll get back in the boardroom here shortly. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is our regular meeting. What is today? January 13th, 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. Looks like we got everybody present. We do have a quorum. We can conduct business. So let's get started. I don't think we have anybody in front of us, Mark, for a public comment period. A member?
No, we had no request for public comment.
Okay. Minutes of previous meetings. Everybody look at them. Any questions, comments, corrections?
Move to
We
approve.
did add the, oh, sorry, real quick. I just
Go
need to
ahead.
say, so everybody knows, we added the special meeting minutes as well. Those are in there.
Yeah. Move to approve the minutes of December 29th of special meeting and the meeting minutes of the December 9th meeting.
Thanks, Liz. Second. Got a second out there. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, second by Mark. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. We need to approve the, oh, you said special meeting minutes too as well, right, Liz?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't need to cover that. Attorney's report, Levi.
Morning, everybody. I too, so I got COVID right before Christmas. So that was somebody's lovely Christmas present to me and my whole, my wife and son also got it. We were better, and now just yesterday I started getting sick with the same symptoms again. So I don't know if it's, so I'm glad we did Zoom. I might be, it's all in my sinuses in my head. So I might be hacking and doing things that'll probably keep my video off for most of the meeting. So I don't subject all of you to that. Other than that, I have nothing to report.
Thanks, Levi. Hope you feel better.
Thanks. Any questions?
All right, Mark.
Okay, we did a couple of local events on Tuesday. The first was a member coffee at Rocky Mountain Roastery here in Granby, and we paid for the first $5 of a member's order, and then allowed them to enter a drawing to win an electric snowblower, which we gave away yesterday. This is the second of our 3 events that we have planned. We had about 40 people that came through, and we got a chance to talk to a number of members. And Justin dropped by to hang out with us and become a video star. We had a videographer and photographer from Tri-State that were there for that event as well as our second event. So he took a lot of video of it, and we plan to use that video to put together something for the annual meeting. Rather than have some reports as we typically have done in the past, we're going to do a little bit more video. So I won't say that it will be more entertaining, but hopefully it will be more engaging for our members than just listening to someone get up and talk. The second event was in the afternoon, and that was the ribbon cutting and check presentation for the EV chargers that were installed at the Winter Park Resort. We had I believe 5 or 6 employees from Winter Park, including the second in command, CA, were there for the check presentation. And Chris had reported that we have seen activity on those chargers almost every day. Now, that doesn't mean that all 14 are being used, but we are seeing people that are using them and charging. 6 are in the garage, and 8 are in the lower lot. Rob put out a press release yesterday, which you should have gotten a copy of, that had one of the photos taken by the Tri-State photographer. And so, yeah, I think it went really well, and the weather could not have been better for that event. It was a little cold in the morning for the coffee event, but that was the good thing about giving away coffee, because everybody got warmed up with that. So I will pause to see if anybody has any questions on either of those two items. Seeing and hearing none, we will move on. As I mentioned, in call to order is the Tri-State Survey. We received it a couple of days ago, and the survey is statistically valid. It incorporates responses from 547 of our members. It's a wealth of really good information. It has 47 questions, and 5 of those questions were MPE specific. Those questions are at the end on pages 17 through 19. And just wanted to go through some of the responses on those. There was a question related to the importance of our community support, and 41% said it's very important to them, and 44% said somewhat important. MPE's renewable progress, 52% said better than expected, and 43% as expected. So we've got pretty high numbers in the positive for most of these things. We ask a question about whether or not members would be willing to pay more to reduce outages. And we did say that we have very little outages. And in this case, 43% said they would not be willing to pay more. 27% said they'd be willing to pay $2 more a month. And 21% said they'd be willing to pay $5 more a month to reduce outages. Now, we're obviously already doing some of this stuff with hardening our system, with trip savers and other things, but we wanted to kind of provide members with some information about the fact that we don't have very many outages, but also give them the opportunity to give us feedback. Satisfaction with MPE compared to other electric providers that they have had, 44% said about the same, 31% said it was better, and 20% said it was much better. And then the one that is somewhat timely based on our conversation last month about CCL was the preferred source of information for our members. 33% said CCL, 30% said our website, 22 text alerts, 7% bill stuffers, social media was 6%, and at least the annual meeting made it on there at 1%. There were a couple of others that are on the list, but they didn't have enough responses to where that they were given any type of number, so they ended up as zeros. So I will pause for a minute to see if anybody has any questions on that.
I refreshed, but I still don't see that survey, but I'm not sure where you said it would be.
It's under number 5, manager's report. It should
Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
And I would encourage you to take some time to go through it, because even the tri-state questions that they ask of all the utilities that they surveyed have some really interesting information about how our members use power, and you know, their source of heat, the age of some of the appliances and stuff like that within their home. So really good information.
Or just how long they've been
How long they've been members.
Members, that's the first thing that I scrolled to, and that was a surprise.
Yeah.
Which is most of our 30% of our members are within 1 to 5 years. Wow.
Marcy, you might have said this, but you guys, were you able to select those questions? Or
Tri-State had general questions that they asked of every utility that they did surveys of, and then they gave us the opportunity to add 5 questions, and the ones that I went over were the 5 that we added. I have talked to a couple of other CEOs, and they chose not to add any questions. I just thought that it was an opportunity for us to maybe get some information specific to us that we wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially like the age of the equipment in the homes and stuff like that. It's some good information for us, I think. Yeah.
And it will help us to potentially work with Tri-State and on our own to target maybe some rebates for things that maybe we had not thought about. And I think it will be great to be able to go through it in more detail and gain some insight into our members and how they're served. So, okay, I'm going to move on to the Ferc settlement. On Tuesday, December 28th, the judge assigned to us, Judge Terry, held a hearing related to discovery. There were some disagreements amongst the interveners and Tri-State as to what was adequate response to questions posed. And several parties participated in the hearing. I believe that there were close to 30 of the parties that participated in the hearing. Most, however, just monitored. Tri-State, United, and Ferc staff actually made arguments before the judge. And the judge issued that day an order, a verbal order at the end of the hearing. We paused for about 20 minutes and then followed that up with a written order clarifying the discovery process that I believe United and Tri-State were both satisfied with, that they could make that work. And so they, at least on the call, they seemed satisfied. Testimony was due on February the 7th, and 3 parties filed testimony. Obviously, Tri-State filed testimony, and theirs is the most voluminous. Northwest Rural Public Power District, or NRPPD, filed testimony, and it's about 15 pages. And then United filed testimony from 2 individuals, one of their individuals and then their consultant. And the testimony is not all that lengthy. However, their consultant has a number of attachments which are much more robust than the testimony. The Ferc staff, or the parties, will file answering testimony on February the 4th. So basically, you get to answer things that somebody else may have brought up. And then Ferc staff will file their direct testimony and answer testimony on March the 4th. And then we will finish it up with the parties filing cross-answering and rebuttal testimony. So you get the opportunity to rebut the testimony of others, and then also file an answer to the answer that they gave you. So that should bring us through the end of the testimony. Discovery has continues. Multiple parties have served requests on Tri-State, and I believe Tri-State actually had a couple of requests for the other parties. Discovery will end on April the 5th. And so we should see a number of things going back and forth between now and then. And then the hearing is scheduled to begin on May the 3rd and is estimated to last 5 to 10 days. It will be held in DC. Judge Terry has not said whether it will be virtual or in person. Tri-State has scheduled a meeting tomorrow for member CEOs to discuss the modified contract termination payment, or CTP. They have not provided any kind of an agenda at this point, so I'm not sure what specifically they are going to discuss, but I will be on that call and report next month on what that is. And if it is something that I think needs to be disseminated to the board before next month, I will send out an email on that. And then the last thing related to Ferc is that the commission has not at this point responded to United's motion for clarification. That doesn't necessarily surprise me. It typically takes about 30 days for them to respond to something at a minimum, and possibly up to 60. So at this point, we are still in a holding pattern related to understanding better what they see as the requirements are for withdrawal. I will pause there for a moment to see if anybody has any questions. Kristen?
Years ago, Tri-State sent around a document about their carbon rate. Has there been an update on that?
Not that I am aware of, but I can ask that question tomorrow, because well, either tomorrow or next week, because I'm going to actually be at Tri-State for meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. So I'll make a record of that and ask them if there's been any update.
Thanks. I read a recent filing for the ERP process in Colorado. You know, Tri-State's been talking a lot about its goals. We've heard on this board that they may not meet those goals. Renewables goals are one thing, the actual emissions are another. And so I'd like to see what their actual emissions are and if they're actually making progress like they're claiming.
I would think, and I don't know this for a fact, I would think that they are making some progress because, of course, they're not using Escalante, and they have reduced some, but how much progress, I think, is what you're looking for. And so I'll ask that question most likely on Tuesday or Wednesday when I'm down there. Any other questions before we move on? Seeing none. As I just mentioned, they're doing the quarterly Tri-State CEO meeting next Tuesday and Wednesday. I will be in Denver for those meetings, and there has not been an agenda distributed at this point, so not exactly sure what we will do. Typically, what they do is Dwayne has a report. There is a finance report. There is a legislative report. There's a legal report. There is an Barbara Walls, which is she also does the compliance. She does a report, and then there are some other reports that are in there, and they sometimes have a guest speaker, and so I'm not sure what will be involved at this point, but I'll report on that next month. The legislative session began yesterday. CREA's Microgrids for Community Resilience Grant Program Bill, HB 22-1013, was officially introduced with bipartisan support. There is a Republican, Pelton from in the House, Cheyenne Wells, Democrat Snyder from Manitou Springs. On the Senate side, it's a Republican from Fountain, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Hesse. And the Democrat from Westminster, Winter, are the co-sponsors of the bill. And we expect to see, obviously, more information on what's being introduced over the next week or so. And CREA typically provides those legislative updates, and so I will send those out to the board as those. So I will pause for a moment, see if anybody has any questions on that I probably can't answer, but I'll pause anyway. Seeing none, move on to, I know all of you are familiar with this, but on December 30th, we received a request from Excel related to the Marshall fires for assistance to help reduce gas usage, help maintain their system pressure. MPE staff developed and implemented a plan to initiate rolling blackouts of the 5 feeders serving Fraser, Tabernash, and Winter Park. And I will say that we did it in about an hour. I think that although this is not something we ever want to do, it was good to see that we were able to coordinate this in a very quick manner because typically if Tri-State was to ask for some type of load reduction, they will give us somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes. So the fact that we can do this as efficiently as we did, I think, is a testament to the staff at Mountain Parks. The first feeder, which served the Winter Park Resort area, was rolled at 7:30 and restored at 8:30. The second, which was the Winter Park town area, was rolled at 8:30 and restored at 9:10. The plan was to do them 60 minutes at a time, but we received notification from Excel that the system pressure had stabilized and no further action was required. I would like to recognize a few of our employees because it was through their efforts that we had a pretty much flawless implementation of it. On the operations side, actually scheduling things and making it happen were Don Finn, Adam Paulson, and Mitch Ocker. And then on the member communication side, it was Stacy Delamano, Amanda Rosenberg, and Rob Taylor. So with that, that is the end of my report, unless anybody has any questions. Liz, turn your mic on.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Is that our largest, during that time period, is that our largest, well, is that the sub with the most energy and demand going out?
It is, and
Does it have more circuits?
yeah, and
Okay.
Excel had specific areas that they needed us to try and target because that's where they were going to have the largest impact.
Okay.
And what they had shared is if by chance the pressure got low enough that it could potentially shut their system down, and when that happened, then it takes, in their opinion, 2 to 3 days to reestablish everything. And that's one of the reasons why we attempted to be as quick as possible in the response to help them out, because we felt that it was in our members' best interest not to have the gas off for that period of time.
Thank you. And thanks to the employees.
Okay, if there are no other questions, then I will move on to the safety report. We had another good month in December. We had no accidents, no incidents, no near misses, and no damage reports. You see a list of things there. The safety committee, their activities, they were involved in mock RESAPs, which are when the RESAP committee comes in, they look at a number of safety issues for us and they grade us on them. What we have been doing with the safety committee is doing mock RESAPs to try and identify things that we know that they will look at and make sure that we are maintaining things the way that they should be. And then on loss prevention, there are 2 items there. We're going to continue to do the mock RESAPs as well as field visits. And the safety coordinator is continuing to check on ADB and altitude as they work for us to make sure that they are meeting our safety standards. Now, this was not in my report, but we are going to have a conversation. Scott and Don will coordinate with ADB and altitude next week. We are concerned about, with the snowfall and the weather that we're having, the narrowness of some roads, that there may be unsafe situations. And for their crews and employees, we do not want them to feel like they have to continue working if they believe it's unsafe. And so we're going to make that clear to them that it is their discretion to determine whether or not it's safe enough for them to work, so that we're not putting their employees. We would not do that with ours. And we want to make sure that theirs are not also put at risk. You see the upcoming or the job training that has been completed, as well as the upcoming events and training for January. So with that, I will attempt to answer any questions that you might have. And if you have no questions, then we can have a motion to approve or accept the safety report.
Move to accept the safety report.
A motion by Liz, and I think that was a second by Dick. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Discussion action items. Mark?
Okay, let me sign back into my iPad here. So you have the 2 policies are up in the rotation. You have policy B1, which is the board of directors and general manager. And looking through, I don't see any suggested changes that Levi had made, but if Levi did make something, it just doesn't appear.
No, no changes.
Okay, so it is available for board discussion and possible approval, as well as making it public.
I move to approve policy B1 and make it public.
Thanks, Liz.
Second.
A motion and a second by Justin. Any further discussion on B1? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? All right, motion carries.
And then we move to policy B2, the general manager's vehicle. Levi didn't make any changes on it. It's actually a fairly short policy, but I will open that up for board discussion and potential approval and making it public.
I'd move to approve B2 and make it public.
Thanks, Justin. Motion by Justin, second by Liz. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Community
That-
solar.
That moves us to community solar. And wouldn't you know, I didn't actually open up that. But while I'm opening that, I will go ahead and say that these were some questions which were submitted. And I think that that they are similar to some of the comments which board members have made over the past few meetings. And that's the one. And I think that comments related to capital credits and how we've handled those, use of the Winter Park land, power supply, and some other issues. And I was a little concerned by the questions because I believe we've covered most of these things in prior board meetings. So I did go back and look at the YouTube prior meetings to see, you know, how we had covered them, to see if I felt like the information was robust enough. And I think that what I would say is that if a board member believes that myself or a member of the management team is not communicating clearly enough or providing the information in a format that the board needs, I would encourage you to, reach out to me and we can put it on, we can discuss the issue and then put it onto an agenda. And we will even create a reference document for discussion purposes and put in the agenda. And we will attempt wherever possible to address it in open session so that there is a record through the YouTube. And then also, as I said, we'll try and create some type of reference document for the issue. So I just want to go through these questions and the document that we put into there. The first question had to do with the way that the deal was structured and the firm number or purchase at the end of the lease term. And we had started this process, if you recall, to negotiate a fixed price for the construction of the community solar. And the original intent was that MPE would own it and it would be constructed by ISI. As we started looking at the price and we're working through issues related to the price to make it something that it was comparable in price to the power that we buy from Tri-State. We started to look at whether or not the investment tax credit, if there was a way or a vehicle for us to take advantage of that investment tax credit and thereby reduce the overall cost of the project. So we explored possibilities with ISI building and owning the project for a period of time, and the initial numbers were between 6 and 8 years. And using CoBank's agreement that we had, where that was slightly different in that it was we built it and paid for it, we sold it to them and then leased it back for a period of time, and then we will own it at the end of that time. And why we did the CoBank as a template was it had a number of things that we knew we would need in it. And more importantly, it had a price certain at the end of it. So we knew when we signed the agreement how much we were going to pay them in order to get it back and own it. And that's what we did. And the problem that we ran into with this as we were negotiating these terms, they continually said, yes, they could do these things. And I think part of it was their effort to try and make the project work. But we had told them that we needed to work off of a fixed price. So you take whatever that fixed price is, and we could break it into 3 parts, which would be an upfront payment, annual lease payments, and then a residual payment at the end. But however you broke up it into those three parts, it had to total what you started with, so that we would know at the time we signed the agreement how much we would pay. Where it became a challenge is that we kept moving things between them, and so we moved a little bit more money to the upfront to help with interest payments on their side. We adjusted the lease payments, and then that fixed payment, that became the sticking point. The initial agreement that they sent us had what we were looking for. We made some tweaks and sent it back to them, and when it came back, they had changed some of those changes that we had made, but also changed the fixed price nature at the end. And that was done because of legal advice that they received, that they said there couldn't be a fixed price. Levi and I worked with them to try and come up with a way that would work for them, because we said we have two agreements currently, and those two agreements both have a fixed price. So there's got to be a way to make this work. We couldn't get there. And as of December 8th, we thought that we had an agreement and that they would change the language to include that fixed price. And then they didn't. And not only did they not do that, when they sent us back a draft on December 30th, it didn't include the fixed price language. And it also shifted about $230,000 of the cost that they were going to pay to us. And that's when, after reviewing that and talking with Stacy about it, I sent them the notice on January 3rd that we were terminating negotiations and expected to competitively bid the project. I really didn't feel that we were going to get to where we needed to be continuing to work on this process. And I will say that Liz had provided a suggestion of potentially working with the ski resort, because they could use the ITC. And at our meeting with them for the ribbon cutting, we broached the subject with them, and they are doing some things related to solar. And so I think it is a possible partnership that we could work with, and that may be something. But at this point, we don't have anything in place, but we're going to continue the conversation with them, and it's at least an opportunity for us. So as I go through these, I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions, rather than waiting all the way to the end. So any question, Kristen?
Does this impact what Fraser was planning to do with ISI?
My understanding is no, because Fraser actually already signed their agreement with ISI. And that project, from everything that I know, is moving forward.
Was the YMCA also doing their project with ISI?
They were, and it does impact theirs, because we were able to get them, I will say, some better pricing, because we were going to do the two projects together. And they have not signed their agreement with ISI. And I don't know whether or not they will, because I would expect their pricing will change. Now, this does not mean that ISI will not build this in the end, because when we put out for competitive bid, they may bid and give us a price, and it may be something that is the most competitive. But at this point, it will not be ISI building it, owning it, and leasing it to us, and then selling it to us at some point in the future. Okay, we will move on to the second question, which was the performance guarantee and how it was structured. Early on, based on our experience with Cyphers and Whiskey Hill, we knew that we wanted a performance guarantee. And the way that we attempted to structure the performance guarantee was based on the actual production compared to what they said the production would be. So we were going to agree on a percentage of their estimated production based on PV-SYST, which are the engineering numbers, and they go through and they say, with this many panels and where it's located, this is what your production should be. And that initially was 4,485 megawatt hours per year. The guarantee was supposed to be a percentage of that. And initially, we had agreed with them that that would be 4,308 megawatt hours, which is 96% of their estimate. And that's the number that we continually went through. But then at some point, as you see in the language that I excerpted from the agreement, they changed it to 4,100 megawatt hours. We told them on at least 3 occasions they needed to change it back. And every time it came back to us, it had the 4,100 megawatt hours. We said that that was not acceptable, and we would not take that performance guarantee. One of the other challenges with the performance guarantee was that they initially agreed that they would do it on an annual basis. They then changed the language to a 3-year average, and at the end of the 3 years would be the first time we would get compensation back. And we told them, no, that's not going to work. That was one thing that they did, in fact, change back to the way it was supposed to be. But unfortunately, that was not sufficient with the other issues that we had related to it. So I will pause for a moment.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, I think those of us who have solar understand that some years are better than other years. Were we going to return excess kilowatt hour sales if it performed above their number? It seems like you're doing a good job for the downside risk, but if you look at, say, Whiskey Hill, there's about 1/4 gigawatt hour of difference between the generation 1 year to the next. And I'm just concerned that we structure a deal that only in the bad years that the person installing it, if it's a bad year, they get the downside. Or I shouldn't say the person installing it. We construct a deal so that one party always takes the downside, but never has the opportunity to take the upside. So should this actually produce, we'd ask them for a 4.3 gigawatt hour guarantee. If it falls under that, they would have to pay us. But what happens if it's 4.5 gigawatt hours? Do they get any benefit from that, so that there's a shared risk? Because that's the nature of solar in some ways, is that you don't really know. And so I guess that I'm trying to put myself in a similarly situated, if we built it and we owned it, if it had a bad year, we'd suck it up, or green power would potentially suck it up, because depending on how much green power funds there are out there, we could suck up about 3/4 gigawatt hour a year. But then in the good year, when it produces more than we expected, that should help cover some of that loss. And so I guess that I'm hoping, as you look at things annually, sometimes you miss the bigger trend. So that's my only, and in 1 year we would suck it up. But if there's an upside, and if that line, if they haven't shot too high, there should be some time when the array outperforms that performance, whatever you've decided where that line should be. So.
And I think that there is nothing in the agreement that would allow them if they overshot. The initial PV syst was 4.5 or 4,539 megawatt hours, and they put in 4,485. And I think that part of that, to your point, is at 96%, if it produces 4,309, which is less than what we were expecting, they still don't have to pay us back. And so I think that 4% differential is part of the compensation, or trying to make it somewhat equal for them, is that they don't have to hit 4,485 every year. They could hit anywhere from there to 4,308. And as long as they do that, we're still going to pay them everything that we owe them. And if it goes under that, so if it produces 4,300 even, then that's when it would kick in that they would have to pay us. So that's, I think, part of what we had talked with them about, and they were comfortable with that, and had even talked about some ways to mitigate a strategy to where that they would always hit over that. But no, we had not put anything into the agreement that would, if they produced over the 4485, that we would pay them anything additional.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the deal with, I mean, it's that we've terminated negotiations with ISI on this type of model. So, but I just want to, as we think about guarantees, you know, maybe that number needs to be, you know, it has to make financial sense for us. I think. I think the Green Powers express some willingness if there's a hesitation that there's going to be subsidy involved, that if the subsidy is not large, that they would like to consider that. This is a project that's very important for their mission, and they feel like it's something that, rather than rebating individual members, this is something that provides solar to the entire membership. So I'm just saying, putting that out there and hoping that that as we move forward with competitive bids, that we think about sort of the upsides and the downsides of that intermittency.
For the board's information, the financial difference between what the vendor was willing to guarantee and what Mountain Parks wanted was $8,062 a year. That is well within the ballpark of what Green Power could cover.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to.
Mark.
Yes, Carl.
Carl, I have a comment. I think that one other thing that should be considered here in the performance guarantee is the response time of the company that we are dealing with. Talking to the local people here, it took them over 10 days to even show up on site to find out what the issue was of why the panels were not rotating, which affects the performance. And then it was a month after that before it was fixed. So there was a month and a half time frame in there that it wasn't producing as advertised. So, you know, I think that needs to be considered also in this issue, and that is not Mountain Parks' fault that they didn't show up. It's their fault. So that load should be totally on them in my mind.
Well, and Carl, it is, because since this is purely based on production, from our vantage point, it doesn't matter if it's environmental, it doesn't matter if it's equipment, it doesn't matter if the equipment is broken or it takes them a long time to come and fix. If it does not produce, we do not pay. And so that's why we had structured it in the format that we had, so that whatever the factor is, and that's actually related to the next question, whatever the factor is, from Mountain Park's perspective, we don't care. If it doesn't produce, we don't want to pay.
And I agree totally with that. So thank you.
Okay. And the next question was it related to the warranty on the equipment or the performance related to environmental conditions? And it was not. It's solely on production. As I said, we don't care why. We just care that it either produces or doesn't. And we have worked with the warranty issues, and actually we replaced an inverter this last week or this week, I believe, in Walden. And part of that was that they gave us some inverters to have on our shelves, even though they're not required to, because we can get there and replace it pretty quickly. And we know what the issue is because the system tells us. And we can do that with the two that we currently have. With this one, we want them to be responsible for doing that. And part of this is not just during the time that they own it. What we are looking for is they are setting up the system for success for the remaining 24 or 22 years that we own it, and it's set up in such a way and the equipment is reliable that when we do own it, as Liz mentioned with the ones that we own, when we own it, if it doesn't produce, that's on us. And so that's what we were hoping to get, is the experience during the time frame that they owned it, and they had designed it and put in equipment that was reliable to ensure that it produced the way that it was supposed to. But I'll stop to see if anybody else has a question on whether warranty on the equipment or environmental conditions played any part in the performance guarantee. Seeing nothing, the next response is fairly quick. Will the competitive bid require a similar performance guarantee? And the answer is yes. As Liz mentioned, we may look at what others have done with performance guarantees, and we may modify it a little bit, but we're still going to look for a performance guarantee. Snow Mountain Ranch had someone come to them and had offered to build a solar for them, and it had performance guarantees built into it, and they stuck with ours because of the pricing. But their performance guarantee was, for the most part, very similar to what we attempted to negotiate, that there's an amount that it should produce, there's an amount that they guarantee it will produce, and any difference below that is what you get, what you don't have to pay for. Liz or Kristen?
Are we going to consider PPAs? Just put all the risk on the vendor?
We can look at that and put all the risk on them. I think that there is an opportunity for us to get more benefit for the members if at some point we own it. But obviously there's risk associated with that as well. And but I believe that Poudre Valley, in one of the first ones that they did do it as a PPA as opposed to owning it.
It just sounds like, there's a low tolerance for risk, and that's one of the ways to de-risk a process.
Well, I would agree with you that it is a way to de-risk, but it typically comes at a cost, and the price is higher. And in looking at this and trying to make the numbers work, this was very close to being something that we would pay more, and the power that we buy from Tri-State. And so that was one of the challenges for us, is trying to keep the cost in that range. And so we can look at a PPA, and we will, when we put it out, if somebody wants to do it as a PPA, we'll consider that. But I would expect that their cost will most likely be slightly higher. Now, if it is I'll say a subset of a larger project, then they may be able to do it in such a way that that they can keep the cost within the range that we need. And it might be a lot easier, especially if it's part of, say, a 100 megawatt project.
I remember last year when Liz brought up a competitive bid and it was dismissed, and I'm glad we're going back to that and considering it. PPAs were also brought up at that time, so please be open to it.
Yeah, and I would say that we didn't dismiss the competitive bid. What we had is we were working with ISI at that time, and I think what the response was is if ISI did not work, that we would look at it as a competitive bid. Liz, you've turned your mic on a couple of times. Did you have a question?
No, I'll let you go through the rest of the questions if people have a tolerance. I have one question, but it's for a later question.
Okay. So the next question was for us, is the structure of the guarantee a deal breaker? And I guess it depends on how you determine the structure of the guarantee as a deal breaker. I think having a guarantee is a deal breaker, that we have to have a guarantee, performance guarantee for the system for some of the reasons that we have experienced with the two that we've got. And I think that the structure of it is something that we need to be in a position that, regardless of what the issue is, whether it's equipment or environmental that could adversely affect us, that needs to be part of that. Now, as Liz said earlier, could we do something that if it produces more, then that we would potentially pay more? That's certainly something that we can take a look at. And I think that was the thought behind their 3-year average, because if it produces well in 1 year, it could cover the deficiencies in the other 2 years, and so thereby they wouldn't end up having to pay anything. And so I think that's part of what they were looking at. I think that one of the the challenges for us is we're trying to make a decision that affects 30 years and do it in a way that we get a price that today looks like it's a good deal, but over 30 years it might not be a good deal. And so we're trying to be as conservative as possible to make sure that happens. And one way, obviously, to do that is, as Kristen said, is do it as a PPA, and then we don't care. They provide it to us. They take all the risk on their side, and if we can do it in such a way that that the pricing of that is competitive, then we can certainly look at doing something like that, because it does shift the risk off of us and our members. So I will pause on that one. The next question had to do with would the board consider a backstop by green power? And I think that is a decision of the board. We did discuss that, and I did not get the sense from the board that anybody would oppose having a backstop from green power. So I think that is something that we would certainly look at, and if green power was willing to do that, and the level to which they would be willing to backstop the project as well. The next question had to do with that proposal from green power and whether or not it was explored. We did consider it, and we had some discussions, I think, with Liz about some of the specifics, but not necessarily what exactly green power would do. And I know that Chris Michalowski is our representative to green power, and so he had provided us with some information, indication of what he thought green power might be willing to do. In the end, it was not purely a cost issue, and with the production issues that we also saw, that we didn't know that green power assistance would overcome all of those issues, and whether the extent to which they would be, as Kristen noted, it's about $8,000, but there could be other factors that come in, and how much of green power's money, because they collect about, I think, $38,000 a year, how much of that would they be willing to put in? And because I would not personally be comfortable asking them to give us a blank check for assistance. I would think that they would want to know that they would backstop it to, we'll just say, $8,000. And right. If it's more than that, then it falls to Mountain Parks to take care of the rest of that. So.
Yeah, I think that gets to the question of environmental versus warranty type of work. I don't speak for the Green Power Committee, but I think that they don't want to be backstopping necessarily loss of production due to a lack of response by the installer to get warranty work done. That's not really, they're trying to, they would be more willing to backstop, hey, there's uncertainty about year-to-year production and how that all works, but you don't want to give an installer a blank check to have equipment installed and then not have to get out there and fix it fast. So I understand, there's a tension there. It would have to be carefully constructed, but I want the board to know and the staff to know that offer's out there. I think if it's going to go forward, we probably shouldn't, and we're going out to bid and we're talking about performance guarantees, we need to be careful about what we say that Green Power is willing to do in public. So that's all I'll say as far as a dollar number. But I think that, there's great interest and willingness to help out.
And I think that one of the things that we've done with both Cyphers and Walden is that the warranty is not typically the issue. The response is the issue. And we have addressed that by working with ISI to get parts that we know have the potential to fail, because we have somebody that can go and replace them fairly quickly. And so as long as we can do that, we can assist whoever with that if they are willing to provide us with the parts to do it. And in negotiating any kind of O&M agreement with the vendor, we will want to address response time, because as Carl has mentioned, that there have been a few times with both of the arrays that the response was not as quick as we would have liked to address the issue and get the project back to performing the way that it could. So moving on, the next question had to do with the assumptions that were used for the performance of the array, and specifically compared to Cyphers and Whiskey. And we did not specifically take into account the performance of those in determining what we would look for in a performance guarantee. However, their performance was the driver for us in asking for a performance guarantee. We did our modeling for both of those and determined what we would need to have in order to break even and have everything work the way that we had, so that we determined, that our members could save $3 million over the life of those projects. Well, if things don't work out the way that you model it, then you potentially don't save $3 million and you might not save anything. And so, and one of the things that determines that in your modeling is how it performs, because you have to make that guesstimate of what the performance is going to be. And we do build in degradation, because we know that over time the panels do degrade, and so they don't perform as well in year 30 as they will in year 1. And so we're building that into it. But our goal in looking at this has been that the price be equal to or less than the cost of the power from Tri-State. Now, one of the questions that was asked by ISI was, did you build in any kind of escalator for Tri-State's power to determine that, this is still a good deal? And the answer is no, that we did not. We did it based on what we have historically paid and what we are paying now. And the reason we did it that way is that we can estimate what we think the price is going to happen. But I think a year and a half ago, we would not have estimated that they would reduce the price by 2% in 21 and another 2% in 22. And so there is both upside and downside in estimating a cost there. And it, I think, affects your potential savings or performance of the project for the members based on those estimates. And so we've taken an approach that it has to make sense based on what we currently pay for power today throughout the 30-year life of the project. So I will pause there to see if there are any questions.
Well, I guess I would say, as the board thinks about price of power now and 25 years from now, that and as we consider certainty and uncertainty, we're talking about the uncertainty of performance, and that seems like a big risk to us. We also should consider the uncertainty of what we'll be paying power, what the difference between those uncertainties. We don't know what we'll be paying for power after 2028. There's certainly some discussion that tri-state rates will go up at that point. And if the difference, if the solar doesn't perform of 0.1 or 0.2 cents or 0.01 cents per kilowatt hour versus the uncertainty of is energy going to be at 4 cents or 5 cents a kilowatt hour in 2030. We don't really know that. We know sort of the narrow band of range of performance on a solar array, but I would say to me, if I were betting, that uncertainty is a much smaller uncertainty than what tri-state power will be 2035. So as we think about uncertainties and fixed price contracts and those types of things, I think we all have to, wonder how we weigh these things and have some discussions on what as a board we're willing to risk and what we're not. I mean, I think this project is very small in terms of our overall sort of power supply discussion, but it brings out a lot of the same thoughts as far as what do we want to commit to and for how long, and how much do we have to know before we do it. So just food for thought on price escalation.
Yeah, and you are correct, and that we don't know. I mean, we can look at the long-term financial forecast of Tri-State to look where they think rates will go, and that is one thing in looking at alternatives that we have, has been part of the discussion, and in those discussions, we have looked for something that is more of a fixed price or certainty. And that was one of the considerations in looking at this as to, if you could achieve that certainty, then you do in fact know what you will pay day one and day 25 year later. So that I think was part of the driver in management looking at this. And you're correct that the board does need to get comfortable with okay, what are they willing to take, what risk, and how much do we look at price of power, whether it increases or decreases. I think not a whole lot of chance it will decrease, but it's greater likelihood that it will increase. And how comfortable are they when we are looking at projects like this and decisions that they have to make related to variable versus a fixed price situation.
Mark?
Yes.
I had a question. Have you looked at how the cost would compare if we change suppliers? Because if we change suppliers and we get a much favorable rate and it's guaranteed for a certain period of time, have we looked at what those differences are or what they would be? And would this project make sense under that scenario? Because both of them would be long-term.
Yes, we did. And I will say that this project as we have constructed it is favorable under the alternate option, and it is potentially less favorable if you look at, well, I guess, okay, let me rephrase it. It works under Tri-State because we anticipate that the Tri-State cost will go up based on their own forecasting. Under an alternate method where it is a longer term contract with a fixed price, it is also, it also works because it's a fixed number that you know, and it compares favorably to the fixed number. Okay, moving on to the community solar contract with Tri-State, and it has a 20-year term. And how is avoided cost of power calculated after 2028? And our analysis is based on the 30-year life of this project. We have had conversations, and in fact, I had a conversation on Tuesday with our Tri-State representative to gain an understanding of what happens after the 20 years of this. And our understanding at this point, and we have nothing in writing, and we would get something in writing before we did this, that there is no change in the way that the project is handled after the 20-year agreement. Begs the question, why have 20 years if the project is going to be 25 or 30? But that is something that we would have to nail down with Tri-State, and what specifically in writing they would say that they would do after the 20-year term of the community solar agreement. And well, I'll stop there because I think the next one is slightly different question. Okay, was an escalation factor used? Why or why not? And the answer is no, we did not use an escalation factor, and we've kind of talked a little bit about that, you know, based on a number of things, you know, why we looked at it from both the Tri-State power perspective as well as an alternative power supplier perspective, but we did not build in an escalator. There, within the cost of the project, there are escalators built in there because with the O&M contract, it does grow over time. The taxes typically are going to reduce over time based on the value of the project. And so with those, we did, for things that I will say are more known and measurable, we adjusted because we know the cost of the maintenance is going to go up. And then we know that taxes based on reduced value of the project should go down, unless, of course, the tax rate goes up, which is a possibility. And so we attempted to build those into our modeling for the project, but we did not build it into a comparison other than to know what Tri-State is proposing based on their long-term financial forecast. Next question has to do with the value of having a relatively certain price of power versus one that's uncertain. And I think we've talked a little bit about that as well, that I believe it's in the co-op's best interest if we can have more certainty as opposed to more uncertainty. And that, you know, that's why when we have been looking at a number of things, we've looked at more certainty if we can get it. But that certainty potentially will come at a risk, because if you have a fixed price contract for 25 years and you know, something changes, somebody comes up with a new black box, and, you know, the price of power today is 4 cents, and you think, well, it's going to continue to go up, and in 25 years it'll be 8 cents, but they come up with a black box and it is actually less than 8 cents. You know, there is always that chance. I mean, it could end up being that in the future, technology is such that we can produce power cheaper than 4 cents. And if you set a fixed price at 4 cents, then, you know, when you get to that point, then it's not as good of a deal. But that's typically, you know, whenever you look at a long-term agreement, even with a purchase power agreement, you know, if you have a fixed price, assuming that they would be willing to do it, that provides some certainty, but it still locks you in. I've seen it happen on both sides with fixed price purchase power agreements, that it was a really great deal until it wasn't, or it was not that great of a deal, and then it never ended up being a great deal. Because you know, you never know, and that's part of what I have talked to a number of the board members about. With, you know, if anybody tells you they can predict the cost of something beyond 5 years, they're lying to you, because nobody really knows what it's going to be after, you know, 5 years out, and even then, it's a pretty good guess. But if somebody can tell you what they think it's going to be in 30 years, I wouldn't trust that, because you just never know, because the future is uncertain with pretty much all kinds of factors. So I will pause there on the question related to a certain price of power versus one of uncertain price. Seeing nothing, we will go on. What sort of subscription models were considered that would bring additional revenue on the top of the avoided cost of power? We had originally discussed with the board that our intent was to try and provide some discount for people that subscribe to this, because they would pay a subscription fee up front. After working through the model, we found that it would be difficult to provide what I would say would be a meaningful discount, but we were still attempting to come up with some type of discount for this. We participated in a COSA-sponsored Clean Energy Solutions Summit, and we were one of the case studies how we would subscribe community solar, and worked with a couple of other entities, one of which is SunShare, and they have developed projects like this, and they provided us with subscription model information, and they talked about the analysis, because they have done a number of different models, some of which they charge the same price that people would pay for power that they get from any other source. Some they give a discount, and some they charge a premium. And it has worked for them using all three models, but there are challenges with all three models. And one of the actual employees of SunShare was somebody that worked at Tri-State, and I have met her in the past. And they were very helpful in providing us with information on how you could structure the subscription model. So I would say that we have looked at all different varieties, that we charge the same price that we would charge on a residential rate. We have looked at discounts in varying amounts and how that affects the model. And then we looked at premiums. And I think the one challenge with a premium is being able to fully subscribe the project, because if you don't fully subscribe, then you end up that the cost will get spread over everybody else, other MPE members, if you're not able to fully subscribe. And I'm not saying that we think if we charge a premium that we wouldn't, but what I will tell you is I have experience with two other projects, and there was a premium, and one of them was not very successful, and the other one didn't happen because they were looking to fully subscribe the projects before they built them. And I think some of it depends on what the premium is. And as with that one question about reliability in the survey, it's the tolerance. How much is that premium, and whether or not you can find enough people that are willing to subscribe. Liz, you look like you've got a question.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious why we need to, the comment is that we don't want other members to subsidize this, but if the whole total project is coming in at less of a cost than we're paying for energy right now, I don't see where the subsidy is. If we don't do the project, we're paying the same amount to Tri-State, slightly more for power. And so I guess, I don't really see where the subsidy is. My thought was on the subscription model is that you try to get some of the money, sort a bit like our service charge, a fixed amount. And that fixed amount covers the reduced price per kilowatt hour. But in the end, it's really a wash. But I guess I don't see the subsidy as long as there's a performance guarantee and the price comes in under 4 cents. It's 4-cent energy, just like we get from Tri-State. And as long as the O&M's included and the taxes and the insurance and all that's rolled up, I don't see the subsidy.
Well, I guess a couple of things. We looked at a model where a subscription payment would be paid up front. So there would be some upfront cost associated with it to cover some of it. The second is that the power is not sub 4 cents. It is in the neighborhood of 4 cents. You see in the performance guarantee what they have as a price. But that does not include all the costs because Mountain Parks is putting some costs into the model that are not covered as part of the project. And so the cost per kilowatt hour is actually not 4 cents. It's very close to 4 cents. And the subsidy would come in that it's potential either way, that the costs that we have modeled are based on everything we know today. Tomorrow, we might have known something different, and there's a potential for subsidy on any project that we do because we do it based on what we know today. And when we sign the agreement, and the cost may in fact be something other than what we anticipated they would be, either on our side or on the cost of the actual project, because part of what we have baked into our modeling is some cost for our employees to things related to this. And the reason we did that was our experience with Whiskey Hill and Cyphers, that we have people that do go out to these projects to do some things. We don't recoup that cost from the builder. And so it adds to our cost. Now, you can make the argument that that person works for us, so we're paying them anyway, so it doesn't matter. Except that if they go and do that, they don't do something else that they could do that it would be beneficial to us. So the subsidy is very fluid, and it may be that the subscribers of this actually subsidize the rest of the Mountain Parks members because they're paying us something and our costs are lower than this. But we make decisions based on what we know today and not what we know tomorrow, and that's the only reason that I put subsidy in there. Okay, let's move on. Where is Tri-State on this project? We sent in an application in June of 21, and then as we had what I will refer to as construction delays, we asked them to put it into a pending status. The application is due 180 days prior to system operation. We believe that based on construction timelines that is not an issue because they do have our application. And these next couple are all Tri-State, so I'm just going to go through them all together and then we can stop for questions. Have we notified them? Yes, when we filed the application. Where are we on the 18-month window? And I wasn't quite sure which 18-month window because typically we have to file the application and then it's 180 days prior to operation. But as I said, the application was filed and it's now been put on hold. Is the system impact study complete? The answer is yes. It has not been finalized or sent to Tri-State because part of it is it's contingent upon the equipment that is used, inverters and other things that may change based on the project design. And we saw that in the, what I will call the cost negotiation phase of this, that in order to make things work, and then with the Biden administration's restrictions related to China, that it continually makes changes to maybe the type of panel that we use, the number of inverters, because the number of panels that are on a string that are on an inverter. And so it's done, and it can be tweaked very easily, but it has been completed, just not finalized. Has Tri-State acknowledged that the project met their eligibility requirements? And that's no, because they acknowledged receipt of the application, but they haven't really done much with the application. I mean, I guess the answer could be yes, that they say that it meets it, but since we have not provided them with the final design of it, I don't think they could tell us that it in fact meets that. And then the last question for Tri-State was, are the terms of Tri-State's community solar contract acceptable? And we're waiting on Tri-State to see exactly what they are going to require. Policy 119 has information in it as to how you do it. We have not seen from them a written agreement that says, this is what you need to do, sign on the dotted line. So with that, I will pause for any questions related to the Tri-State questions.
Are there other Tri-State members who've built community solar under policy 119?
There are other Tri-State members that are looking at projects, and I think possibly one or two that are starting construction, or at least in the planning phase and design phase. I don't know, and Carl may be able to answer this, whether or not anybody has completed a solar project under policy 119. I believe the answer is no at this point. Carl, do you know if anybody has?
And Mark, I think you're correct. I was under the assumption that Poudre Valley had a community solar project up and running, but I could be wrong on that.
What's Mountain View's new policy under, 19 or 15?
I do not know whether theirs is 119 or 15. I believe that most of the solar projects that are being considered or currently under construction by Tri-State members are under 119. But I don't know that for certain. Okay, and then the last question is, have we made a pre-application, had a pre-application meeting with community development? And the answer is no to that also, because we were waiting on a final design, because we have had a number of changes to the design in order to try and accommodate costs on both sides. Until we had the final design, we weren't going to go and have that meeting with them, because that's one of the things that they want to see is what is the design of it, and didn't want to go in and have the conversation with them and then have to go back and say, well, that's what it was, but it is now something different, because one of the challenges with the first go round on this with the county was they had indicated that they could do things fairly quickly. We gave them information. It didn't happen. And then, of course, the project ultimately failed because we weren't able to get access to the land that we needed to put it on. So we have gone through all the questions, and I will open up if anybody has a question either related to one of those questions or some other question related to community solar. Seeing,
Thank you, Mark, for answering, going through this.
not a problem. Kristen?
Would it be helpful to you to have some volunteer work from the board pursuing grants?
And I know that you have provided some information on possible grants, and if someone, you or someone else, was interested in helping us pursue grants, we would be happy to do that, because obviously that makes our modeling a lot easier, because if there's less cost, then it's a lot easier to make the numbers work.
I'd only, I have time to do it, but I don't want to be a burden on staff. I figured if it could be helpful to you, I'd be happy to volunteer my time on that.
And I do know that you and I have had conversations with the individual, I believe it's USDA and the program that they have. In talking with her, I think there are some challenges with the way that their program is structured. If there is a way for us to make all of it kind of fit together, I'm all about taking money from other people that's free. Although typically nothing is free. Any other questions before we move on? Seeing and hearing none, I think then, Jeff, we are to the staff reports.
Mark, let's take a 15-minute break.
Okay,
Be back here at 9:45 work.
that works.
Okay, we'll see everybody back here in a little bit.
So Dick, is it still warm? Mike, turn your mic on.
Yes, it's still warm. We're going to get our COVID test this afternoon. So I have to be out of here, but be off the air by 3:30, go get our COVID test. And this is the first time I thought I'd like to get a positive test, judging from the weather back home, but I'll take a negative.
Well, they say it's warming up though.
Yeah, what, you getting up to 15 or 20?
Well, no, I think it'll be positive temperatures.
Yeah, no, it's been really nice. Yeah, but we have to go over this afternoon, get the tests and make sure we're all okay. And of course, there was a cold going around down here, just like everybody up there. And so nobody knows whether they have COVID or they just have a cold or they have the flu. So a lot of people have been going, almost all the tests have been coming back negative. And then of course, somebody turns to you and says, well, they don't even test you. They just give you a negative so they get you out of the country. So you have no idea what's going on, but yeah, they take your $25 and they give you a test. So you have no idea, you go in, there's a nurse and a doctor, you go into the room and they do the swab. Some places you spit in an envelope and 20 minutes later, you get an email saying either positive or negative. And of all the people, since I've been here, I've heard of 2 positive tests. And that's thousands of people going through there.
Is it a government program?
Pardon?
Is it a government program that does the testing or is it just independent people?
I believe you have to register with the government, but all of the hotels and condo associations have someone on staff. They have rooms set aside that they'll put you in if you test positive and they'll keep you confined there. But there are places in town, you can go to the hospital. They have a couple of other freestanding clinics. They have one at the airport. And I don't know, knowing Mexico, you talk to some of the locals, they say these people are just making, $15,000 a week because the government doesn't pay for it down here.
Okay.
So I mean, for some of the locals, you might be able to go and get a test and not pay for it. But for all the visitors and everything, it's $25 a pop. And people are taking 2 and 3 tests, just to make sure. I got a cold Saturday. I went over and took a test the next day and it was negative. So hopefully, but hey, if it's positive, I'll get another week in the sun.
There you go. Upside.
Yeah, but it's very expensive when you don't have reservations and you don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Jeff, you're on.
Okay, let's get back at it. Scott, are you ready?
Yes, I am. You all have my report. Does anybody have any questions? Anything in my report?
Hold on a minute.
Scott, I wanted to thank you for doing that secondary fault calculation. That hopefully that'll clear things up.
Yeah, it's been really interesting with the change in guard at the state electrical inspectors, and we're doing our best to try to help our customers get through it. But they certainly have some different things that they're looking at and checking for than what we've been used to.
Or did you provide that to the inspectors, or is that something we need to get from you to provide to them?
We will be setting up a meeting and with the inspectors. I have talked with Craig about doing that. I don't think we've done that yet, but it's on our to-do list.
Okay, thanks.
We're kind of waiting to see if they're going to hire a permanent inspector for this area, but at the moment, it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, I think they're having some difficulty finding somebody. Though it would seem that way, at least. We were, a year into this, probably?
Yeah, it's really been difficult.
Yeah, that was what my note on your report was too, was to ask about this. And I was curious, it's just because of the change in guard in our area, or is it across the state?
Our local inspector retired.
Yeah.
And so they've been bringing people up from Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And so they definitely have different things that they look out for, and it's okay. I mean, we want to make sure everybody has a safe system,
Right.
but the information that we have previously provided was not, I don't want to say it wasn't good enough, but we want to make sure that it was as accurate as can be due to the scrutiny that they're putting all the electricians under at the moment.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and there's
Thank-
code
Go ahead.
changes as well that go along with that list too. So
All right, well, good. Well, thanks for making that possible, and thank you for the current specing the current limiting fuses the way you have, and saving some
Yeah,
money.
that's going to be an ongoing thing. The trip saver that we have been looking at is about a $3,000 device, and it's certainly applicable in a lot of places on our system. But when we have fuses and devices that rarely ever operate, a current limiting fuse is a good option to that. A current limiting fuse costs in the neighborhood of $200 to $300, and so it's not a cheap device. A regular fuse link costs about $5. So there's a significant cost to trying to look at this equipment and make it so that we're not at risk for starting fires and stuff like that. But we're trying to make sure that we deploy these devices where they're not going to operate unless they absolutely have to.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Scott, yes, Scott, this is Carl. I have a question. Your concerns that you voiced to Connexon, did you get a satisfactory answer?
Yeah, they're doing better. This project, I think, is unusual for Connexon in that we already had a contractor on board, and trying to get things moving in a very short time frame. And I believe that their Connexon's management may have made promises that, oh, this is going to be really easy. And instead, when you go through a regular process, it takes a lot longer than the time frame that was given to do this project. On hindsight, I would have said, well, we'll hold off this year on phase 1, and in 2022 we'll do phase 1 and 2. Unfortunately, that's water under the bridge. I did direct them yesterday to start looking at phase 2, and that I expect them to follow the normal process. And they have assured me that it is going to be a much smoother project than phase 1 was.
Is ABD satisfactory also?
They're doing good work. They're using subcontractors, and it's just going very slow.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Any
Kristen?
update with Connexon for offering service to our members?
No, they have not come back to us with any commitment to do that. Levi and I will be scheduling a call with an attorney that specializes in fiber to the home broadband, and we are looking at the possibility of doing an RFP to see if there is somebody else that would be interested in doing that, because we do have some entities within the area that have contacted us, and they want to be able to, well, a number of them, they want to be able to connect. And we also need to know from this attorney who specializes in this, what specifically we might need to do if we wanted to do something like one-offs with these folks to allow them to move a little bit faster. They're larger organizations. It's not an individual homeowner type thing. And so we're seeing if we can move the process along, since Connexon has not been willing to make a commitment to do fiber to the home as of yet.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Don.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I've submitted my report. Any questions on my report from the operations perspective? One addition that I will add, one change is FEMA has allocated another well over $700,000. So we're setting over $2 million right now that's allocated to the state in regards to our recovery efforts. The obligation to the state is a process too that we're working through with them. So the fire on the Front Range slowed things down a little bit for them on there. They have a lot of contractors working on that now too. So.
Well, Don, the feds released the money to the state, and that money's earmarked to us.
Exactly.
And but so, what they have to make, what's the state do you have to do with it at this point?
It's pretty elaborate. I mean, we have to go through all the invoicing and all the, we have to give them documentation of that again. They can't just pull it out of our grants portal. So they have to verify all that. They actually are hiring contractors to do a lot of that work for the state and be able to report back to the state. So
what you've already done at the federal level, you have to do again at the state.
Yes.
Okay.
It's excellent news.
It'll go faster. I promise.
I'm sorry for you.
No, it's been good. And like, you know, the nice thing is all that documentation is there. So it's not something that we have to go digging for again. And, you know, it's something that we can just, okay, boom, here's what you needed. They just have to verify once again.
Don, this is Carl. I have a question for you. In your report, you said you completed the third large generator move into Jackson County. Can you explain that a little?
Yeah, what that is, Carl, it's, you know, the company brought those generators in to be able to utilize that excess gas up, you know, that has been mined up there. So they're utilizing that natural gas to actually power those generators. They were monsters coming into the state, you know, so a lot of the lines and things of that nature had to be moved up, or either, or I don't think we had to de-energize any primary, but at the secondary, some of those had to be de-energized for that. Is that what you're asking, Carl?
Yeah, there's some rumors up here about they're bringing in these generators, running them on natural gas and mining Bitcoin. Is there any validity?
Yeah, that's exactly what is happening. There is a cryptocurrency entity, and they are the owners of the generators to power their operations. They have made an agreement with D90, which is the oil field and gas field operator, to sell excess gas that was being flared that they cannot flare anymore, to power these generators. And we had looked at it, because if it was D90 that was going to be doing this, we were going to tell them they could not. But because the generator is owned by the cryptocurrency folks, so they own the generator, they're providing their own power to do the cryptocurrency mining, and they're just buying gas from somebody else, there's not much we can do about it.
So are they selling load then also to the oil field to run the pumps as well as?
No,
Okay.
we have made that clear that they can use it for their purposes. They can't sell it to anybody else.
Okay, so Mountain Parks is not losing any load then to the oil company.
not to the oil company, but if the cryptocurrency people had come in and connected to our system, we would have gotten a significant load increase. But they chose to buy these large generators that are gas powered to provide their own power.
What,
Okay, thank you.
how are they communicating up there? What sort of, I'm guessing they need a broadband or something. I mean, that's sort of not, it's just a personal question. It really has nothing to do with the board, so I should shut up.
Well, no, I believe the provider of internet service up there has access to fiber that is owned by another company. And I assume, and this is purely an assumption on my part, that they are somehow connecting into that fiber to be able to do their mining.
I guess I only say that because I can't see Carl. He's calling in by phone. And yet there's cryptocurrency mining going on in next door to him or somewhere up there.
It's a little bit away from him. You know, I guess the good thing is if they had put it next to him, then he would have really good internet. Unfortunately, they wouldn't have access to the gas. So they located right next to the oil field so that they have easy access to the gas.
Carl, any word on that wind project?
My understanding about their connection is through CenturyLink. They have a fiber line coming from 40 into Walden, and Vista Beam has made an agreement, a short-term agreement with them to utilize that line. So that's my understanding of where they're making their connection, and that's where Vista Beam has been impatient with Mountain Parks bringing the fiber into the park here because they would like to get away from CenturyLink and hook on to ours. So that's my assumption.
Kristen, I don't think we heard your question.
Any word on that wind project in Jackson?
We have not heard any additional information. I don't know if Carl has in the area up there.
No, I haven't heard anything more than what was in the paper. I think it's a pie in the sky project, but I haven't heard anything more on it.
Any other questions for Don? If not, he's going to move on to the fleet vehicle replacement plan or report.
No other questions? I don't know, Joe, if you want to, actually, everybody's got a copy of it. It was in the call to order, excuse me. And in regards to our overall fleet plan. And I got to tell you, it's been an interesting last 6 months with the supply chain issues and looking at some of the fleet that we need to replace. And, you know, when we're talking on some of our larger equipment, 600 to 800 days out to be able to get that equipment, you know, it warranted, you know, getting a more detailed plan together and being able to set back and say, okay, what is our utilization rates and things of that nature. And obviously we're always looking at trying to minimize our repair costs and looking at that overhead all the time and looking at, you know, having more productive drivers. Fuel savings is a big part of our bill. You know, we spend $700,000 on our fleet. That's the diesel, that's the repairs, that's things of that nature. So fuel savings is big. If we can start looking at some of the EV features that are out there, you know, so there is hybrids that I actually was in a previous job that I was buying that the crews were really appreciative of having those buckets to be able to not listen to the diesel as the bucket was up in the air, and they had better communication. So it also provided a good safety feature on that. You know, some of the questions that we ask when we're determining our schedule for our overall replacement is our utilization. You know, we got rid of several pieces of equipment this year because of low utilization. You know, if we're not using that vehicle, if it's sitting there, if it's not getting the time it needs, if it's just kind of antiquated and something that we need to be getting rid of, we're looking at that utilization and continually monitoring that. You know, do we have the proper specs? We work with a lot of folks across the state and across the nation in regards to new safety features for our crews to be able to work the primary voltages, and looking at that on a regular basis, not looking at that shiny object all the time necessarily, because that's an easy thing to get distracted on. You know, if somebody wants, oh, looks really cool, you know, we try to look and try to utilize other managers with the different co-ops and how they're speccing their fleets. Short-term and long-term work plans, you know, I think that's a huge one. You know, when we're looking at changing our focus on a lot more underground, a lot more, you know, getting with our wildfire mitigation plans, you know, what kind of equipment do we need? And that's been a collaborative effort between Scott and I and others, just looking at our overall fleet. And then, you know, obviously it's the NISC and being able to utilize that system to determine what our actual repair costs are, what our overall maintenance is, and what, you know, our ROI is on this pieces of equipment. I talked about utilization a little bit, you know, and I talked about the proper specs is networking with other co-ops, looking at safe and reliable specs, you know, something that's going to last for the co-op and its members. You know, that utilization rate needs to stay up, and we need to keep monitoring that to be able to determine, you know, which vehicles are needed and which aren't, and obviously looking for that long-term lasting equipment for our members. And I talked about the equipment needs, the underground tendencies that we have, you know, and NISC is a great tool. It's just the ability to be able to put in the right data to get the right data out. And everybody knows that with software, it's are we putting in the right data? So Stacy her and I have been working on that diligently. I've got a team that is actually, okay, are we putting in the right data to be able to not just look at it as an overhead, but be able to get down to the detail per piece of equipment. You know, how often are fueling this thing up? How often are we have it in the garage for repairs, things of that nature? And it's really showing us, okay, even though a vehicle might be at that 100,000 mile mark, you know, it's not costing us that much money, you know, and it's something that we can hold on to. And that's what we've been doing. I mean, that's kind of been the mode of operation for the co-op for a lot of years too, is, you know, we've got a lot of old equipment and it's working. So it's something that we're not spending a lot of money on. So there are some things that we're looking at that are getting above that 100,000 mile mark and maybe even the 20-year mark, you know, to be able to say, okay, it's time for a change. Our fleet to the numbers, I really like this. It kind of shows you that we have the $4.7 million overall fleet value. So that includes all of our power operator equipment, our POE. That includes, you know, our buckets, our trucks, our fleet trucks, our you know, anything that folks are going to use, even all the way down to our lawnmowers, you know, if we've got a lawnmower here in the shop. We're at an 8% annual equipment replacement. We budget that, and that's what Stacy's worked on. You know, we looked at, is that enough? You know, are we hurting ourselves in regards to maintenance, repairs, and things of that nature? And that's what we keep pulling out. So if something's costing us more than that, you know, we're going to stick with that 8%, but we may have to adjust that up. It depends a lot on too is lead time on some of this equipment, which I talked about earlier, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So A standard rule of thumb across the utility industry, and it really across the, if you talk to CDOT, if you talk to different departments of transportation, is 100,000 miles for heavy duty trucks. You really got to calculate in the hours too, because it's a lot of times those trucks are sitting and idling, and they're out in the field. And then, when we're looking at light duty vehicles, a lot of times, realistically, in today's world, we can get to that 120,000 to 150,000, and we got plenty that are at those numbers now. So, if you look at, I put in here like Mountain Parks' fleet age and mileage. Our light duty vehicles average age 8 years. We've got some outliers out there. We have a couple new ones that have brought that down quite a bit. So we do have some old ones. I know the stakers are running on some older Ford Rangers that we need to look at that are on our watch list that we have. Okay, how much are we actually spending on repairs on this? Heavy duty vehicles, 11 years we average. So then again, I told you, if we're not spending a lot of money on it, and they're working and the mechanics feel good about it, that's where we're at with that. Our POE, that's where we're looking at, a lot of the older pieces of equipment. I mean, when we're having 18 years and we're spending more time with those being broke down or in the shop and things of that nature. But the utilization in those are critical too. And, can I go and just rent one, or can the crews go and rent one for the short time that we need it? And, this summer we did some of that. We had to rent some Mini X's. We had to do things of that nature. Our pool vehicles were averaging about 5 years with an overall mileage of 39,000. So that's really all I've got. Obviously, it's always a moving target. It's been a real eye opener to me with the supply chain issues that we've had in regards to when a vendor tells me, you're going to be out 600 to 800 days, and my jaw drops. So it's something that we'll continue to work on, and we'll continue to try to leverage some of our co-ops together to be able to help with some of this purchasing. Any questions for me?
Thank you for putting this together, Don.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, we've had it together. It's just something that, to be able to put down on paper, and I appreciate you guys asking too. So.
Yeah, and I was, the power operated equipment, 18-year average age, that was, to me, I mean, I don't know, as supply chain issues change, who knows what's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years, and everyone's in the same boat. Who knows what happens with rental fleets, but making sure that there's good equipment for our guys when they're trying to get a job done and it's safe is important. So the 18 years was a little bit of a, it's a tickler for me anyway, to make sure that we have what we need. And that's what you guys do. So thanks.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't share too, as we bought a new F-550 last year, and Mark kind of giggled at me if you don't mind me sharing this, but it was a lemon. So I actually ended up working with Ford Corporate, and they are actually doing the buyback program with us to be able to get us paid back for our truck, so we can actually go out and purchase something different. That was a painful process going through the lemon law process with them. So.
Yeah, we have more miles driving it to and from the dealership to get it fixed than we do actually using it in the field. We've actually used it in the field for 2 days.
Exactly.
And the reason why is because with the dealer, when they would fix it, they would say, okay, it's good to go. And we would go to pick it up, and we didn't generally make it more than 2 or 3 miles before it broke down again.
And here I thought you were going to say you were so lucky that you bought a truck last year because you can't even get them this year.
No. Well, they can't find one to replace it, and I don't know if I want to go that model anyway. So yeah.
Right.
And Liz, to the 18 years, the Tucker Snowcat is in there too. So that's 19 40.
Oh, I took that outlier out of there.
Okay, good.
That really skews it.
I think that's a barely operated equipment, Justin, barely power operated.
I have a parade vehicle category that I have in there too, so I can take that out. All right.
Sir, Mark, are you going to go over finance?
I am going to cover that. So you have Stacy's report, and if you have any questions, I'm going to try and do my best, but I will not be as good as Stacy, I'm sure. Justin.
Just, I think she's gone over this before, but is the sales tax or sales expense, where's that calculated from? And I'm looking on basically the first page, line 10. Is that coming from like our sales tax for that? I know we get charged on the solar arrays and that type of items. So line 10 on the form 7 there.
Right. I do know you are correct that we get a use tax on the solar, but it is not that much. So that's coming from somewhere else. I will make a note of that and get an answer for you on it.
Wait, no rush. I just had wondered.
I think that has more to do with the operations that have to do with our sales of power and communications and member relations and all of those things. But that's how I remember that being answered in the past. But I don't know for sure.
I know somebody that will know, and we can get an answer for you and email that back to the board. Other questions?
It'll be interesting to see December.
Yes, because we did have some cold weather, and while cold weather is not good for a number of things, it typically is good for electric sales.
Yeah, but there wasn't as much snow, so compared to a normal. So I was just curious how that trade-off will be. There's probably a lot more snowmaking. Anyway.
There was a fair amount. As I think most of you know, I live up at Granby Ranch, and I look out my window and I see the base of the one ski lift, and they were making snow pretty much every night. Unfortunately, by about noon, all the snow that they made had melted, and so it wasn't sticking. So, but they were making it pretty much every night. So it will be interesting to see how that affected. I know that at least it seemed that it didn't slow down the number of visitors to the area because they had probably made their reservations, far enough in advance that they were going to come whether there was snow or not.
Liz, on the green power financials, I had noticed earlier, I think it was 23 member rebates. Is that the most ever? I guess I've sort of seen that trending up, but is that the most we've ever had?
Yeah, it is. It actually came in a little less than I thought it would be, but some of that was I believe that is the most. The solar co-op really sort of prompted more, I think, more installations than normal. But yeah.
And it adds up to 190 kilowatts now. So
yeah, there's quite a bit of solar being installed for sure.
I think you got off easy, Mark.
You can always count on Justin to ask the tough question. So thank you, Justin.
I am the treasurer.
Okay, Joe.
So you have my report. If there's any questions, I'll answer those. And I'll just add one update about the Log4j vulnerability that was discovered in November, December. Since I wrote this, news continues to come in about this, and most of the researchers, vendors, just general news about this seems to indicate that this will be a very, very long process to determine just how pervasive this vulnerability is. It's wrapped into so many products that the vendors don't even often know that it's somewhere buried in a product that they offer, sell, support. We continue to follow the situation, and we ask our vendors regularly for updates if they have found any vulnerabilities or have any other mitigation strategies we need to be aware of and implement. But it is pretty serious. And it's, like I said, most of the vendors, or not most, but many vendors don't even realize that they are vulnerable to this attack.
Any plan to find a workaround for the multi-factor supply chain issues so we can have
Yeah,
multi-factor
so
authentication?
there's a couple of options we have. Every time we ask our vendor, they tell us it's going to be next week or it's going to be 2 weeks. So we would rather go with plan A than a workaround. But I think we're at the end of our rope now. The last update was, I think, supposed to be last week. We were supposed to get the authentication fobs. So the option that we are left with is to use personal cell phones or desk phones to receive a phone call instead of using a fob, which creates a little more coordination issues in that we have to make sure we have accurate cell phone numbers, desk phones, people sitting at another desk, all that programmed into the system ahead of time so that they can receive a phone call where they are. But that's the way we're going to go if we don't get them by the end of January. So. Right.
Joe, this is Carl. Your last comment on your report is, with hindsight, was Tantalus the best company to deal with? It seems to me like every month you have issues with the meters or the collectors or something. Are they working with us to the extent that we expect to right all these wrongs that are being created by their equipment?
They do. We are in the process of identifying this round of trouble we have. And I'll, to be perfectly fair to Tantalus, Carl, I think their system is truly one of the best systems for a company of our size. It's really has a really robust communication mechanism. It does a really good job of taking every possible way to get the data back here. I mean, it heals itself, it reroutes itself, it does all kinds of things. And when I mention these troubles, some of them are in fact Tantalus problems, but some of them are the manufacturer of the meters problem. Like this particular problem, we think is actually an Itron problem. It's not actually a Tantalus problem. We think that there's a problem with the way the meter is powering the communication module. So I say it's Tantalus's problem just for simplicity in my report, but I think in fact, it's the underlying manufacturer of the meter that has the problem with this. They are somewhat less helpful, but they are still talking with us, and we expect that we'll be getting some credit for new meters we buy or something like that to work out the finances of it. Some of that's yet to be determined, but that's the direction we're going right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Mark, are you doing human resources as well?
I am stepping up for Jessica as well. So if you have questions on Jessica's report, I will attempt to answer those.
I don't see any questions. Like Rob's up.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'll say the same thing. You have my report. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer those. Mark did mention the Tri-State End-Use Report. I believe that's our first scientifically valid survey of more than 500 members in some years. Very good information. And I don't know if he mentioned it or not, but the scientific accuracy is plus or minus about 1%. So that's also very good. So I just reiterate Mark's remarks. I encourage you to take a look at that if you haven't already, and I will answer any questions you might have.
And Rob, I was within that 1%. I did not mention it, but I was within the 1% accuracy.
Okay.
Have we done any analysis on the time of use customers to see if that's really helping us reduce our peak?
We haven't yet done that. We could certainly check into that. I'd have to look at my report. I think we have about, is it 60 time of use customers now? And again, yeah, and they, to qualify for our EV charger rebate, they need to sign up for that. But one thing I can share, Kristen, is we're looking into a app that we might be able to add to Smart Hub that can take your historic usage, plunk it into this app and determine if you would be better on the time of use rate or the regular rate based on your historic usage. So don't know if we're going to be able to pull it off or not. Right now it looks promising, and we're working with other utilities to do that.
And what it also does, Kristen, is it allows you to, it tells you based on your usage whether or not you can save money. But it also allows you to tweak and say, if I used less power during this time, would I have saved money? And so it's a very interesting app, and the co-op that developed it is willing to share it with us for free. But it does take some work on our side to actually make it work, or to see whether or not it actually does work. So that's something that Rob's area is working in conjunction with Joe on to see if we can kind of make that happen, because we think that it would be a great tool for members that might want to look at that rate, but they're not going to know whether or not it would help them.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, just really interesting to see whether or not that incentive rate has the intended effect that we were hoping it would.
I know that we, when we looked into it, I think it was if you used 73% of your power off peak, you were going to save money. But I can look into if we could do some analysis on those that are on that rate.
I'm more interested in what Mountain Parks is saving on demand, but I'm hopeful that the members are also saving.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Okay. Any other questions?
Rob, when is our next coffee event? I know it is in Grand Lake.
Yep, it's February 11th. That's the Friday before Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is on a Monday. You might want to circle that one on the calendar. But it's Friday, February 11th at the Hub in Grand Lake from 9 to 11. We've been really appreciative. I know that in the past year, even though we've gone through all the things we have, we've seen many of the board members at our events, and I think that's a really nice touch for our members that show up to see a board member there. So thank you all for taking the time.
And so if you don't have a Valentine's idea, you can bring your special someone and get them a free coffee.
Mark, I'm not sure that counts, but okay.
Well, maybe a cookie too,
I don't think I'll try that, Mark. but I will be there, Rob.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
I'm just trying to help you guys out. Yeah. Well, what about this? We will also be giving away an electric snow blower, so you could register for that and then maybe give that as a Valentine's gift.
Okay.
Worse than giving cooking equipment to your wife or significant other.
Yes, but if it is the wife giving it to the husband,
Oh, we're
he
going
might
down
expect-
we're going down the wrong path.
All right, any more questions for Rob? Rob, you got anything else?
No.
All right, bills for payment. Nothing? Dick, if you're talking to us. No, okay. All right, open board forum. Who wants to start? Mr. Volt, you got anything? All right, Justin? Liz?
Yeah,
The
The formula rate committee will meet February 8th and 9th. That's the first meetings. Green Power, I shared their thoughts. So I guess that's it.
Liz, where are you at with board member replacement on there?
We talked
track of
about
that.
a strategy, but then the fires happened and the COVID got worse. So there haven't been any in-person meetings or meetings with potential candidates. It's coming.
Are you down?
We're down. So we need we're looking for folks from the western part of the county, of Grant County, and your area, Jeff. So any names you want to forward would be great.
Are those two board members, are they still the committee members there? Are they still there or?
No, they
Okay.
have, they both, November was their last meeting.
I
So,
thought.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
working on it. All right,
working on it. Yeah.
thank you.
Mark, if you have any ideas, please let me know.
Krista, did you have something?
Yeah, I'd like to spend a little time discussing formula rates and what that might mean for the future of our co-op. Liz, could you give an overview of just what a formula rate is? And I know I've read a little bit up on this, and it looks like there's entire consumer groups that have been organized to oppose formula rates because they think it creates reduced incentive for utilities to control cost, rate instability, and so forth. Curious if there's any upside here, what this means for mountain parks.
Well, I've been reading and I've been talking to Mark a bit about it. And there are a couple of things that I was curious about. And I shouldn't have said formula rate committee. I should have said rate committee. But one of the first things I did was read Tri-State's policies. And as Carl has said, Tri-State wants to or intends to go to a formula rate. And so Tri-State, by its policies, when they want to change how their rates are designed, needs to have a rate committee that reviews it and makes recommendations to their board of directors prior to the board of directors voting on the rate. One of my concerns was whether or not the decision had already been made and whether the rate committee would just rubber stamp whatever staff recommended. Because to me, the question is, does a formula rate make sense for mountain parks? Does it make sense for Tri-State? And then how is it actually designed? And I was concerned that Tri-State had already made the decision that it did make sense for Tri-State, regardless of how it affects the members. So the idea would be that there would be certain costs, say a fuel cost, or that would be the typical one that people would have in a formula rate, my understanding is. And if that cost went up beyond what was, well, that cost would be allowed to float. And the company who's charging the rate would be allowed to, after the cost went up, recoup that money. The cost to them went up, recoup that money, which makes the rates uncertain to the end use consumer. On the other hand, and this is just broad philosophy. On the other hand, it allows the utility to perhaps set rates less often and to make sure that they don't have to have a sudden rate increase in the middle of the year because fuel costs went through the roof. So there's pros and cons. The question is whether or not with a formula rate, can you be competitive in the marketplace? Tri-State has based its rate on a cost-based rate. That's a cost that the board, the organization sets, my understanding, the organization sets, the directors vote on that rate. And that's how the rate in the past has really been designed. FERC didn't have to look at it. The PUCs, New Mexico and Colorado, did look at instances where they disagreed with how that rate was designed. But in reality, it's been a cost-based rate, and Tri-State really hasn't had to compete in a marketplace, which we are going to see in the future if the RTO or a Western marketplace gets set up. Their resources are going to have to compete in that, I think. I mean, that's my understanding. Maybe with the wholesale electric service contracts, they won't have to compete in it. And those costs, even though they're more than in the marketplace, will be shifted to members. But anyway, a formula rate, unlike the certainty we have in some ways right now, we have certainty in 2022 that our demand and generation and transmission demand will be a certain price. And the energy that we use from Tri-State will be a certain price, and that we can bank on that when we design our rates and charge our members. With a formula rate, depending on how they do it, if that rate didn't cover their costs, didn't get them enough margins in 2022, in 2023, they could bump it up to recoup the costs that they lost in 2022. Or, like Holy Cross has a fuel surcharge, so that can float more often. Could they do it monthly? Well, that would be a real headache for us, probably be a headache
could
for
we get
them.
hit with those high bills because of gas purchased for power generation, like some of the other co-ops are dealing with?
Right. So, I have a lot to learn about formula rates. I mean, on a macro level, there's discussion about whether or not a formula rate should, like in IOUs, the risk that a lot of the risks in an IOU can be shared with the shareholders and not necessarily passed on to the consumer, or depending on what the PUC or FERC says. We're in a slightly different situation because Tri-State doesn't have any shareholders. So there's that aspect of it as well. So anyway, I have a ton to learn. I'm concerned about how it would affect our members. And again, it goes to the issue of certainty versus uncertainty. If we don't really know what the true price of something is, and people don't know what the price is, and then they're going to get nailed next year for it, that's a concern to me. And then the incentives of operating, if you can always recoup your costs and you have a captive audience, what's the incentive to operate in a cost-effective way other than sort of peer pressure, I guess. So, and maybe that is FERC looking at those rates, but that's a tremendously expensive process for us to question the rates at FERC, the rate design at FERC. And it's also something that I don't even know how it would happen for, Mark would probably know this, but if one of our large users had an issue with the rate that we were passing through from Tri-State, is the venue the PUC, is the venue FERC, how would they do it, you know? So there are a lot of questions, I think.
Yeah, I think in answer to that question, the venue becomes FERC since they are now FERC regulated. In answer to Christian, your question, are there benefits? There are, I'll say, potential benefits. One of the reasons why FERC went to these for a lot of IOUs, 20, 30 years ago, was they would have a fixed rate that they would charge you. And one of those components would be fuel. Fuel tends to be relatively volatile, and it can go up a lot or it can go down a lot. What they were seeing with some of the IOUs is they built into their base rate a cost for fuel. And then as their fuel cost went down, they had no incentive whatsoever to come in and ask for a change in rate because they could just make more money. Now, if their price of fuel went up, they definitely had an incentive to come in to ask for a higher rate. And so FERC looked at this and the, I'll say, inequity of something like fuel, which is very volatile, and they put in place fuel adjustment clauses to allow that to float. So they took it out of the base rate and put it into a fuel adjustment clause, which basically the utility passes through their actual expense related to fuel and purchase power, typically in a fuel adjustment clause. There are sometimes some other things that are included in there as well, but that allows it to float. So in theory, the customer gets the benefit of downward prices as well as then pays, and the company is not at risk if the price goes up significantly, because under as Liz said, you go and you try and change the rate, you're always going to have regulatory lag. And with either a PUC or FERC, that lag could be 12 to 18 months. And the company then is at risk for that additional cost until such time as if something is put in place subject to refund.
So the company could theoretically set a lower rate because they don't feel they have that risk of if fuel goes really high. They might, if they know they can't recoup it, they might set a higher rate. So, that's just in theory. My concern, of course, is if they know they can always recoup the cost, what's the incentive to shift to a lower cost resource or design something, what's the incentive to not just pass that cost on, but really look at your resource mix and what does, it gets complicated. One thing that Mark has mentioned and I've noticed is that Tri-State may try to include the margin as part of the formula rate so that they always have a certain amount of margin. And I would say that in some ways that maybe not having the margin is their incentive to operate in the most effective way possible, because that margin really could be the incentive for them to perform versus allowing them to get a good margin regardless of performance. So
yeah, and I think that's one of the key things that the committee will look at is I guess the first question is if you want to allow for a formula rate, and the second question is if you do, what cost do you put into the formula? Because that's the thing that what I have seen both on the federal and state level is that it is typically required to be a cost that is extremely volatile, that you don't have a lot of control over, and it bounces up and down. And so you're trying to smooth out some of that and protect the consumer as well as the company. Some of the things that at the managers meeting, when it was discussed with the managers, that Tri-State suggested that were possibilities that they would put in there, I don't think that they fit that description, and that there isn't the volatility in it. And so that's the thing I think that the member owners of Tri-State really need to take a very close look at, is what you put in there. The other thing that I've discussed with Liz is that if Tri-State was to move to a formula rate, I believe it pretty much forces all of the distribution co-op owners to go to a formula rate, because you don't have the ability to change your rates as quickly as you want to in order to, you mentioned the I'll say a February surprise that some of the co-ops got from Excel. And if that happened, you can't change your rates fast enough, because that cost could come in 1 month and, they can pass it on to you, but then that's the challenge, is how fast can you turn around and be able to collect that cost from members. So I think that's one of the things that the committee will need to look at as well. And I mentioned that, and I think some of the other CEOs had not thought of that. Some of them actually are already on a formula rate. I think it's more common in New Mexico, and it's something to do with the way that the state looks at things. So they already have them. They don't typically change them as frequently as would potentially happen with a Tri-State rate, because you can do it on a monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual basis. And that's the key, is that frequency, and then how quickly you as a distribution co-op can make a change to accommodate the fact that you're now paying a significantly higher cost, or, well, potentially significantly higher cost.
And I think this gets to the point, I think all of us as board members should think about how this affects the economics of Mount Parks, and but also how it affects our members. And as we think about power supply issues, whether our members, how much appetite for risk they have versus certainty of a fixed price going forward. Because to me, that's kind of what this is about.
And the last thing, and Liz touched a little bit on this, is the other potential benefit to a customer is that the company will tell you that they can have a lower margin because they don't have to plan for the volatility. What I have seen in practice is that sometimes happens, but usually does not. The margin does not change, and they could collect the same type of margin, but they don't have the same risk because of the volatility is taken out of the equation.
Thank you all.
Kristen, did you have anything?
I have a question. Given that we have another round of elections coming up this year, how many members do we have in each of the different member districts? It's variable, right?
Variable? I mean, as far as the district counts?
Yeah, like how come we don't have a roughly equal number of members in each of our director districts?
And I think, Mark, what is our policy on that? That gets looked at every few years as far as those district boundaries.
Within the bylaws, it says that it will be looked at no less than every 10 years. And I believe the last time that it was looked at was in 2017. And that happened to be the time frame when that 7th district was added, I believe. And Kristen is right that the number of members within the district will change based on growth patterns. And some of our districts are growing faster than others. And so, and I think that Kristen is right in that the area that Carl serves probably has the fewest number of members, and there's a possibility that you could expand that area, make it larger to try and equal it out. But I believe the board in the past has determined that they would, leave that the same, because Carl's area is basically all of Jackson County.
Like, what is the difference in members? Like, I remember when I was running in 2019, there was roughly 4,000 members that I was given a mailing list for. So 4,000 people get to elect a director. How many people get to elect a director for Jackson, for instance?
We'll get the member count by district and provide that to the board. I don't know that we can tell you by district right now what that number is.
It's definitely a lengthy process to go through, I believe. If I remember it last time that staff went through it, it took a lot of time and effort, and I guess I can see why it rotates on the basis that it does.
Well,
I
guess the question is, to get the number is fairly simple with NISC. To make a change to the district to be able to equalize the number of members, I think that is the challenging part that Jeff is referring to. And sorry, Levi, I cut you off.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to, so the bylaws say that not greater than 10 years from and after the 2016 annual meeting is when, so that's the maximum amount of time, 10 years after 2016, that the board is directed to review the boundary lines.
But Levi, I believe that it does allow you to do it more frequently.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the outside.
My question is limited to date at what is the difference? Like, for example, I looked up the housing units and there was something like 1,800. So if we have twice as many people in one district as another, that's a pretty big discrepancy. If it's a difference of, 100 or two, maybe that's roughly equal. But given that we don't allow our entire membership to vote, I think there are some questions about fairness.
And I do believe that I mean, I don't have the specific numbers, but I do believe there are districts that the number of members is definitely more than 100 between districts. So we'll get the board the member count by district, and then we'll give that to the board hopefully within the next few days. And then we can put it on the agenda for February if the board wants to have a discussion about that disparity between the number of members between districts.
If I remember right, it was adding in, I mean, we had to basically get half of Granby, if I remember right, into Carl's district or all of Grand Lake. I mean, it was where you started drawing these little offshoots clear into populated areas where the demographics of Carl's is probably more unique to his membership, and same with yours versus Mark's, and would be my recollection of what we looked at before.
Yeah, I think you're right, Justin. Richard, you got anything?
I forwarded the financial reports for Western United. If anybody has any questions, I am running for basically treasurer because I believe their budgeting scenario is faulty. And in fact, the person who's doing it now was looking at making some changes at my insistence. They just haven't been realistic the way they budget. So if I am successful, and that'll be at the January meeting, then we will definitely have a more realistic budget. When you're that far off between budget and actual, you create a lot of problems. They wind up having a lot of a greater margin. And the problem is the staff always has been saying that, well, you get to share 80% of the margins, and the people that work there get 20%. The difference is we have to wait 6 years to get our 80%. And my recommendation is that we adjust the pricing to bring that more into a more realistic scenario, that you're getting the benefit of lower prices so that when you're realizing your margins currently rather than waiting 6 years. So hopefully we can get that accomplished. I know I have some support on the board for doing that. It's just a matter of I get in the position where I can control it. So I will let you know after the January meeting what's going on. And they have their annual meeting again in February at the CREA meeting. And that's all I've got for Western. Another thing that Christian brought up about the housing committee and the difference between being inside and outside of Winter Park. Now, I've been out of town, so I haven't been able to check on it, but I realized a couple of things. One is there's a 1% fee if you sell your property within Winter Park or if you're in the county. The bigger question to me was, what do you do about water and sewer in that area? I don't know if you're required to connect to the water board or whatever the water district is there, or do you put in a well and a septic? So I'm not familiar with that information. And I think that's something that if nobody else wants to do it, I'm going to check with the town when I get back. I don't know whether you check with the town or whether you check with the water district as to the difference in costs of tying into their system, whether you're required to, or whether you are able to do a well and septic. And then of course, with the water scenario, I don't know which one you're allowed to do. So those are some of the scenarios that I think need to be addressed before we go any further. Because if it makes more sense to be within the town, does it make more sense for us to do it, or do we wind up selling it and let whoever buys it have that option? But I think we have to know the difference in cost, and I think that was a good point that she brought up, that we have to look at that. So I don't know whether the board wants to assign someone that project. I just haven't been able to do the contact work from where I am. So that's
my initial question was, just for everyone's context, my question to the housing committee had been, during this period where the property is off market, does it make sense to get started on any paperwork that may be required to, for example, bring the property into the boundary of Winter Park or get it added to the water district, which is separate from Winter Park. It's actually a county water district. So
yeah.
So you sort of understanding the pros and cons and the processes of water and sanitation development and county growth plans and annexation on all of those things. And I think when putting it on the market, we just pass that risk off to whoever the buyer might have been. And now it's not on the market anymore. How deep we want to get into those questions and whether it actually increases the value or the ability to develop the parcel or not. So, and what the trade-offs and costs are.
Right. So when I get back in town, I will endeavor to take that up and get information back to the board as to what the cost would be and if there are any benefits or detriments to having it one way or the other before we put it back on the market, if that works. That's it.
Yeah, we might want to add that. Mark, can we add that to our executive session discussion today?
Sure.
Okay. Thanks, Dick. Carl, you got anything?
I sent out the report from Dwayne and Tim Rabin about it. I don't know that I have a whole lot left on that they didn't cover. The couple things I will mention that happened that the board passed is they made a budget adjustment to do the eastern transmission line. They had revised numbers on the cost. They came up with 185 million. The project will start in 2022 this year and end in 2028. And it will essentially tie Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico all together through transmission that Tri-State owns. Also, we'll say that the board voted to reopen the partial requirements. There's a 90-day notice, and they expect it to start in February. And that will be for the 97 megawatts that are still out there. So if anybody's interested, that will be offered again. And one other comment I have about Liz's comment on the formula rate is that the Tri-State Board has not made the determination that we are going to go to a formula rate. It's been recommended by mostly Ken Wright, but there is a number of concerns amongst all the members, as the same concerns that Liz brought out, and especially the irrigating co-ops, as they want stability. They don't want to have a rate that goes up and down so that the farmers don't know what the heck their costs are going to be for pumping water. So there should be a lot of discussion in the committee. And one other thing that I will mention, I think the committee is open to anyone that wants to attend, board of directors of Tri-State and also board of directors of the local co-op. So if anybody's interested in listening in on all that stuff, you can certainly do it. I know I'm going to, because I don't know a heck of a lot about formula rates. So, and I think the first 2 sessions or 3 sessions are going to be mostly to supply information about them. They've hired a consulting company that does a lot of work for Ferc and others on formula rates to give presentations about them. So it should be very interesting. But that's about all I have.
Carl, do you think that you'll be able to listen to that virtually or no?
Well, I can't answer that at this time. I don't know that it won't be totally, with the COVID situation, be totally a virtual meeting, but I think that they're going to have the opportunity to listen in, yes, but I can certainly check on that, or Mark can when he's down there next week.
Yeah, I will add that to my list of questions for them.
It'd be interesting if we could get, I'd like to let the committee do its work, but, like you said, Carl, if the first couple, sessions are going to be just talking about what that whole process looks like, it might be good to listen in on at least that portion for me.
I totally agree, and I plan on doing that. So either in person or virtually. So to make a decision at Tri-State, the best decision I can make for Mountain Parks is to have a little information about it.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I totally want to learn about it, to the formula rate thing. It'll be interesting there's one thing about learning about it. There's another thing about thinking about how it affects consumers, to Kristen's point, and your point about the irrigators, Carl. So it'll be interesting to see if they have any consultants who speak about formula rates from in that vein, versus in the vein of keeping the utility financially sound, because it's sort of a trade-off to me. So anyway, I look forward to this whole process, I guess.
And I think with your position being on the committee, that you can request that if there's not satisfaction with the consulting firm that they have scheduled, is to bring someone else in to talk about all of that. So
Maybe look at that Elcon organization. I think it's a lot of oil and gas, but they've been operating since '76. They know formula rates.
I believe that's his last name's Costello, and I've been reading some of his stuff.
All right, anybody got anything else? I don't have much. Go ahead, Carl.
I just want to let the board know that I sent out an email related to line 10. Bethany in finance is watching, and so she actually gave the list of items that are included in line 10.
Okay. I don't have much to report on CRA. We didn't have a meeting. Mark kind of stole my thunder with the microgrid bill that was introduced. So we'll see where that goes. It's got bipartisan support, so that's good to see. I did want to thank everybody at Mountain Parks. They've got a lot of calls during the last snowstorm and during the fire, and really about every part of Mountain Parks it's touched. You know, I've got a couple calls on our reliability, all good. I got a call from a gal who had lost her power. I couldn't get there. I'd asked her to call Mountain Parks. She did. They pinged her meter, said she had power, but they had a line in the area, was able to get her power back on for her. And then one just about communication as well, that Mountain Parks has done an excellent job communicating what's going on. I saw that in our HOA Facebook page. So just thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and I want to say I got one of those too, that during the rolling blackouts, the follow-up after the rolling blackout ended, that Mountain Parks followed up and said, hey, you know, is your power on? It should be. If it's not, you know, do thus and such or something. And that was really, really appreciated by that member. So thank you for everybody for going beyond.
Okay, do we have any emergency business, Mark?
No.
Any old business?
Not that I'm aware of.
New business?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do we have a need for a services meeting?
Liz is shaking her head no.
Okay. So we do have a need for an executive session. What do you think, Mark? Maybe take a little break, and then maybe we can move into executive session now, take a little break, and then come back. Would that work for everybody?
That would be fine. I don't believe that the topics that we have listed should take that much time. Employee housing timeline, it is just an update. And depending on the discussion on the Winter Park land, the first item, the RUS financing, you have the information there. It's basically 3 slides. We'll talk about that. And, you know, the board can take additional time if they choose to make a decision. So we could make the decision outside of executive session in today or in February.
Okay. Just trying to think ahead if we wanted to try maybe take a little break and then push through to the end.
Yeah, well,
or take a lunch break if staff needs to take a lunch break.
Not really. How about if we take a 10-minute break and come back at 11:20, and then we can go till people get hungry, because we don't want anybody to be hangry, and then we can do that. But I think going into executive session before we go into the break is probably easier, because then we can turn off the YouTube.
Okay.
One question before you do that. I'm trying to recall, I believe that Mountain Park Services is required to have a meeting every so often. And I remember something like that, like it was either quarterly or not. And I just wanted to make sure someone can check the calendar to see if we're required to have it, even if we have no business. Not that it hasn't been, you know, I don't know. So I don't know whether Levi would have that in his stuff. But I remember something because we had gone a period.
I can look for that. I don't remember there being a requirement every so often. We do need to set an annual meeting and elect officers.
Yeah.
So I'll look into that. And
Yeah, I believe that's the only requirement that we have is to do those things.
Yeah. And I can't remember if it was before Michelle came on with Jessica or if it was with Michelle. I thought we had set those up on the calendar to make sure those things got done.
I'll take a look.
Thanks, Michelle.
No problem.
Okay, we do have 3 items in executive session. If somebody could take us there, I would appreciate it.
Move to go into executive session to discuss potential changes in Mountain Park's financing, legal, and housing timeline.
And Winter Park land.
Yeah, well, housing timeline, Winter Park land.
Okay, thanks, Liz. And a second? Got a second by Mr. Volt. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, I guess we're there. We can cut our live stream.